I'm Trio. Welcome to You've Got This, Sis. I believe there are times we need a sis to see us for who we are, where we are, exactly how we are, and then see all that we can be. The sis that can do that with each of us is a real treasure. I've had my moments, sis. I realize that our connections to one another are absolutely gold. I know there are times that we journey solo, and there are times we journey with others. Both are completely necessary for our growth and increased strength as women. You are here with me, and I am here with you. And we will journey wherever you are now to your best self, always. Welcome to You've Got This, Sis.
Welcome to episode 28 of You've Got This, Sis. I'm Trio, and this is Thanksgiving week. So first of all, happy Thanksgiving. I hope that you get to spend quality time with those that you love, making new memories and letting each and every person know how much they mean to you. I think that there's no better way to celebrate this week than talking with my friend Marco Brown. He shares with us his story and his wife's story, and as we think about their journey, there's so much that we all have to be grateful for. So I encourage you to listen to Marco, and then I encourage you to reflect upon your own life and your own journey and recognize those things that are your gifts and that have come your way, and that we have so much to be grateful for.
All right. Okay. So today I have with me a good friend of mine and my husband's. His name is Marco Brown, and he is a great friend. We've been on a journey together as young couples is when we first met one another, and it's been several years and a few kids later now. And so we're going to dive into Marco's journey with his wife, Demarie, and kind of hear his heart and his story today. So thanks for being here, Marco.
Hey, thank you very much, Trio. It's good to see you. We don't get out to Nebraska too much, so it's
right, because you're in Utah, correct?
Yeah, we're in Salt Lake.
Mm-hmm. Now, I want to highlight a little bit of what you do as a profession and also kind of toot your horn a little, because that's important. You are a divorce attorney, right?
I am. Yep. That's all we do is divorce in our law firm.
Okay. And you created Brown Law. And you guys have been named. You have several awards, but one of the top divorce attorneys in Utah in 2015, but I'm sure that is still the same because I've looked on your website and people just have testimonials and they have amazing things to say about the work that you do and the care that you take for each individual and their family. And I think that's amazing. So kudos to you guys.
Yeah. Thank you very much. We try hard. We really do try hard to serve our clients well and communicate a lot, because it's a really tough time to go through, right? We're seeing people at their worst, and our job is to help them the best we can.
Yeah, not to mention all the, pains and emotional trauma that led up to that decision, and then going through it is probably no less traumatic too sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I tell Dem, I call my wife Dem, her name is Demarie. I tell my wife this all the time. I only see people at their best at church and at parties.
Aww.
All the other time they're all compromised when I see them.
Yes, that is true. Okay, you guys, I love Marco, and so I'm glad that you guys get to hear from him today. Marco, although you have like this amazing law firm and you created it, I want you to tell listeners kind of where this all started. Back when we met, you were in law school. When you finished law school, what was the next step for you and Demarie?
So I finished in 2007. Dem got her master's at the same time. So she sings opera, and she got her master's out at the University of Nebraska, where we met and where I went to law school. at the same time. And then I took a job clerking for judges in the 3rd district in Iowa. So I would help them with trials. I would help them write orders and trial decisions, do research for them. So I did that for a year, and still my favorite job of all. I absolutely loved that job so much, but it was tough because it was in Iowa. So we were in, that was in northern Iowa. So I'd go out there for 4 days out of the week, and then I would come back for 3 days. I set up a thing with my judges on the first day. I said, can I work 4 days a week and then go home for 3? Because, my wife's still in Nebraska. And they said, yeah, sure, that's fine. So did that. And then right after I started that job, and then we adopted our first son right then. So in the midst of all of this, me being gone, Demery had started her doctorate program at the University of Nebraska. We adopted our first son, Elliot. And it was nuts. It was just an insane time.
That sounds like a crazy time. And I roughly remember it, but I wasn't there in your perspective. And so that is a lot when you talk about how you were in Iowa for 4 days out of the week. Demery was starting and doing her master's. And then, you guys had applied to adopt, correct? And was this something like, oftentimes with adoption, is that call just kind of out of the blue? What led up to Elliot joining you guys?
So we've been trying to have a baby since I think 6 months into our marriage, and nothing had worked, and the doctors couldn't tell us what was wrong, and they still can't. Honestly, they've never given us a diagnosis. So we just gone through a period where maybe it would happen, maybe it wouldn't. And then we had some friends, Matt and Evia Warner, in law school with us that started the adoption process. And Dem and I started talking about it and thought, why don't we do that? So we went through that kind of journey with Matt and Evia. And Matt and Evia got their first baby a few months before we did, I believe. And then we got Elliot. The whole process took about 18 months. So we were in the middle of law school, kind of going through the adoption process and trying to figure that out. And then it happened right after we left, or I graduated from law school.
Wow. So how many years was that total? Like you and Demery were trying to have a baby?
Well, we just barely had our first baby. We did IVF, and 2 years ago we had Teddy. So what was that? 18 years, 17 years, something like that.
17 years. And then Elliot came along because is he 13?
He's 12.
Okay.
He's 12.
So you guys had been married for a while, trying to have a baby before you adopted Elliot. And so
I think six years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then he came along, and that's really exciting. But what about the timing?
So the timing was, interesting, right? It was very difficult to get through that. I look back at it and I think, wow, we went through a lot that year. So the timing was tough. The toughest thing, to be totally frank about it, was that we're Mormon, and the biological mother, was not. It was this interesting story that she had 3 other kids, and Elliot came along, I think, a year after his biological sister. Okay. So she already couldn't deal with the 3, and then Elliot comes along, and she knew that she just couldn't handle it in any way, shape, or form. So, and she knew abortion was wrong, so she wanted to adopt. And I think she just picked something out of the phone book. She just looked up adoption in the phone book, and boom, there we go. So she went to LDS Family Services, which is the kind of social services wing of our church, and it just walked in and said, hey, I want to adopt out my baby. And the social worker is sitting there, and he said, okay. And he just took her through the process. I think it was in one sitting. I think 2 hours later, she had picked us out of back in those days, you did collages. So you had photo collages of you and your wife and your husband and all these things. So she just looked through that, and she picked us. We talked with her. We went to, it was St. Louis. She was from St. Louis. So we went and met her. And it was funny because she said, well, I picked you guys because I liked Marco's smile. And I thought, well, there's got to be something more to it than that, because I don't have a real great smile. But she was a very, very nice woman. And so we went through that process. She wanted us to be there at the birth, she wanted Demery to have that experience. And I didn't realize that that was not normal. Our social worker didn't tell us that was not normal. So we went, we were there for the birth. I think it happened at 2:00 in the morning. So we were super tired. And then the next day, she changed her mind, and we kind of saw it happening a little bit. We'd already decided on a name. So we gave her the name, and then she changed her mind. And I'd already bonded. So I picked up Elliot and fed him a bottle, and I had completely bonded with him at that moment. Dem, it took her a while longer. It took her about 6 months to really bond, which is fine. That happens for adopted couples all the time. You just have different timing. But I'd bonded immediately, and then the biological mom changed her mind. And I remember I cried like a little child. It was horrible because it was like I was losing my kid, right? And so Dem and I cried together, and we went home, drove back to Nebraska, which was one of the most terrible things. I mean, what do you talk about in the car after that, right? It was just 6 hours of silence, essentially. And then had to go back to work the day after that. So I went back, I got in a car and went back to 3.5 hours to my clerking job. On Wednesday of that week, we got a text from the social worker. He said, "Are you still interested in Elliot?" So I gave him a call back and I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Well, she changed her mind again." "Are you guys still interested?" I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely, we're interested." So at that point, we didn't do anything. We just kind of let that play out until she terminated her rights in front of a judge about 2 weeks later. And then we went and picked him up. So it was a very, very interesting process and very difficult.
Yes. And thank you for sharing that with everyone, because sometimes we don't understand the process of adoption, and we don't understand, even though somebody says, "Yes, please adopt my baby," it's still a process. Like, you're not the actual parent until they terminate their rights. And how long does that take? She took 2 weeks, but do you know about, on average, what that looks like, Marco?
So it depends on the state. It depends on the state adoption laws. Here in Utah, you can waive your rights. So the father can waive his rights preemptively before the birth, and that's irrevocable. Then the mom can do it after, I believe it's 24 hours, and then it becomes irrevocable at that point. Most states will give 48 hours. Sometimes they'll give a week. But yeah, it really does depend on the state. So Missouri was 48 hours. So she was about 18 hours into it, and then she said, I'm not going to do it. And then we had to deal with that because that's just the way it is. But I think about adoption. I'm a huge proponent of adoption. Absolutely love it. But it is kind of like childbirth in the sense that there are any number of things that can go wrong during childbirth, right? Now that we've gone through childbirth and I've seen Demery go through that, I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm amazed that it works ever. There's so many parts to that process that can go wrong at any given moment. And adoption is kind of the same thing. It works until it doesn't, and there are points in the process where stuff can go completely off the rails, and we tend to think of that as different than the birthing process, but it's really not. It's just different stuff can go wrong at different times.
Yeah. So if you were to give people some advice, if they are looking or thinking to adopt, what would you say?
Well, one, you have to determine whether or not it's right for you. There are some people that can deal with it emotionally. So, Demery was able to deal with it emotionally really, really well. She's a strong woman. That was great for her. And then, some people can't. And if you can't because you want your own baby, you want your own biological baby or nothing, that's totally fine, right? But just determine within yourself what you can deal with, and if you want that, because some people can deal okay with the fact that, so our son's black and looks absolutely nothing like us, right? And we can deal with that because I don't really care. But some other people do care, and that doesn't mean you're a racist. That just means that that's your makeup and constitution as a person, and that's all right. You have to figure these things out within yourself.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, because I'm planning on hopefully finding a picture of your family. So when this post, people can see you and also your family and get an idea of what we're talking about as well. But I remember when you used to come over on game days and hang out, and Elliot would be with you. And, I think about you and Demarie and that time in your life where she was pursuing her desire to get her degree, and it required a lot of you. We talked about you commuting to Iowa and back, but when you were home, it wasn't like you just put your feet up and were able to chill and like relax. When you came back, you had this little baby, and from what I saw, you stepped in full fledged and really just took on the mantle of fatherhood. So I think talk a little bit about that too. During that time, what were some of the things that maybe you took on, or how you best supported Demarie for her to pursue her education?
Yeah. So during that period, we had the setup that 4 days of the week she was obviously alone with Elliot, and then the 3 days that I was home, I got up with him, I took care of him, I did all of that, and then she would, she'd go to school, she would do what she needed to do. So that was the way that I could help. We had some, and then on the money side of things, we were both super poor at that at that point. We just, and we'll get into debt because I always talk about debt and getting rid of debt. But uh, I think we had $150,000 in student loan debt at that point. We had some money, and I think I was making $45,000 a year as a clerk. So I unfortunately wasn't contributing a ton in that way, but we had enough to get by, and we just, we scraped by. But really, it was just working as a team to get things done.
Yeah.
Right? That's ultimately what it was.
Did you ever find yourself or Demarie like resenting one another for anything? Like,
No,
okay,
no. I don't think I've ever had that kind of emotion in my marriage.
that's awesome. I love that. Okay, so we've talked about the difficulty of Elliot's adoption, and you would say that that was probably one of the most difficult things you've been through in your life. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was really tough.
Yeah.
The thought of losing him after I had personally bonded with him it was really extraordinarily difficult. That was probably the most difficult emotional thing I'd ever gone through to that point in my life. The IVF, some of the stuff that happened during our IVF process was worse, and it's hard to get worse than that, but that got worse.
Really?
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
I guess chronologically, you guys moved from Nebraska, not straight to Utah. You actually moved from Nebraska, was it to New Mexico?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Farmington, New
And you
Mexico.
you took a job there, right?
Hmm. Yep. I took a job with an insurance defense firm.
Okay. And was Demarie, did she graduated from UNL with her master's, and then did she dive straight into her doctorate?
Yeah, she did. So she was doing that year that I was clerking. She was doing her doctorate part time and teaching part time as well at, I think it was Northeast High School. I
Yeah.
can't remember what it was called, but she was teaching 2-3 hours a day there.
Okay. Wow. So when you guys went to Farmington, New Mexico,
Hmm.
you were working for
Hmm.
this insurance firm, and tell us a little bit about life at that time.
So we decided. So my parents lived in Farmington, New Mexico, and Demarie's parents lived in San Angelo, Texas, where they still live. So we decided that we had just adopted. We wanted to get closer to family because it was our first kid. So we wanted to do that. And we talked about whether or not we were going to move to Texas or to New Mexico. We just decided on New Mexico. I got a job down there. And that was difficult. We were living with my parents for a bit just to save money and try to pay things off, and that has its own unique dynamic, let's put it that way. It's tough, right? Because we're all independent people. I'm independent, she's
Yeah.
independent. Like that was difficult. But that at that point she had to quit her job and the doctorate program to move down there. So she made a big sacrifice for me to be able to do that. And then she started working. She's a teacher by trade, so she started teaching down there. And we were down there for about 2 years. So, she was teaching. I was working in the law firm. Elliot was tiny. We were doing our thing. And the unfortunate thing about it, from my perspective, was I hated my job. It was the absolute worst job I ever had in my entire life. And I feel really bad about this period of time because I would go to work, I would come home, and I didn't smile for. I remember at one point, I don't think I smiled for 3 months, which puts a lot of stress on your spouse when you're in that emotional state, right? So she was a trooper, and she really cared about me and put up with that. But that was a very difficult time. When I went to her and I said I wanted to quit because I just can't do this anymore, she was really happy about it because she obviously knew that there was something really wrong and we needed to get out. So we did.
So at that point, what'd you do? You got out, which that in itself would be probably a difficult decision to make.
Yeah, it was hard. I felt like a loser. You're your husband and you want to take care of your family, and then you say, "Oh, I want to quit my job." So, and it was really interesting. When I quit, I had a conversation with the partner who was over me, so my direct supervisor, who was also my religious leader. So that made it even weirder.
Yeah.
I go to talk to him, and he said, I just want to tell you, Marco, that this really surprises me, and I'm kind of disappointed in you that you would make this decision. And I said, well, I just don't enjoy this work at all. It's super boring, and I just don't do boring. But it was worse than that. Like, I'm downplaying it a bit, but that's essentially what I told him. And he said, well, look, I haven't liked my job for 25 years, and this is what my family expects of me, is to provide for them. So this is what I do. I remember thinking to myself, nope, there is no way in Hades that I'm going to continue with this conversation. I'm getting out. And if that was law, then I was going to go do something else. If I couldn't find something better that fulfilled me as a human being and allowed me to be a good husband and father emotionally to my family, like, I'm done. I'm going to be a banker or some other thing like that. I don't know.
Right.
But that was the conversation. I left and I'm like, all right, I'm done. So then we left. And from there,
did you have anything?
We had the decision to make what we were going to do, whether we were going to stay in Farmington or leave.
I was just going to say, did you have anything lined up?
No, not at all. It was one of those where I just emotionally couldn't take it anymore and had to get out. So we did. And then we had to talk about what was our next move. And Dem had been thinking about going back to the University of Utah, or going to the University of Utah to finish her doctorate, because her voice teacher from Nebraska had moved to the University of Utah. So she moved to Salt Lake with her husband. And we talked about that and decided that we wanted to give that a go. So she went and applied and she got in. So we went to Salt Lake. We moved to Salt Lake and to allow her to finish up her doctorate. And that was the point where I started the law firm. But, at that point, like, she had gone to Nebraska and New Mexico for me. And I thought, okay, this is the time that I need to follow her and let her do her thing.
Okay. I love this on a few different levels. The first one is that you had a conversation with your both boss and religious leader in the office, in which he told you that he had been working for 25 years, even though he pretty much hated his job because that was his duty. And I think that this is just strength of character, that you're, aligning yourself with what serves you and fulfills you, because I think that's a super important part of the journey and of us as people, that sometimes we just do stuff because it's paying the bills, but we hate it, but yet we don't have the courage. And sometimes I think of it as self-integrity, really, to serve ourselves and love ourselves enough to find something that will fulfill us and serve us, even if it means like leaving the job and making a really hard decision of, you had nothing lined up. Like, there was going to be no money coming in that way. And so I think your just integrity and your heart and your courage in that way is amazing. But oftentimes people won't make the hard decision because of fear. However, I don't know that I'm putting words in your mouth, maybe, but that you have a lot of fear about things because I think you're a solution oriented person. Like, you'll figure something out. And so you were going to support Demery in her doctorate program, and you guys made the move. And then, and then you guys were there and you started your law firm, but I don't think it was as easy as that. So give us the backstory of that too, because you were saying, if this was law, I'll do anything else, because that was not what you had gone into law for. So tell us how you got into where you are now, because we've talked about it before, but it wasn't ever something you kind of pictured yourself doing. But all of these little steps led you along the way and led you to this. So talk to us about that, because I think you took a huge leap of faith saying, okay, let's do this. I'm quitting my job. You got into the doctorate program. Let's go.
Yeah, no, there was a lot of fear that went on during that period of time. And, that never really goes away when you have your own business. I still am afraid probably every day about things, because now I have a team and I have to worry about them. But you just learn to deal with the fear. That is what it comes down to. So are you going to let it control you, or are you going to control it? Right.
Right.
And Jamie Foxx has this great quote, which is, what's on the other side of fear? Nothing. Right. It's just stuff you make up in your head. So, but no, there was a lot of it. We had $150,000 in debt. I had quit my job. She had quit her job. We were going to go, and she was going to, I think she had a stipend for $1,500 a month to be a doctorate student. Right. And that didn't cover anything. So we came here, and it's 2010. You got to remember that. And 2010 is not a good year at all. And it was a very bad year for attorneys. There were large firms in New York, LA, Chicago shutting down completely. So, and which doesn't happen, the attorney land is very, very stable compared to other industries. So it was very, very bad. And nobody was hiring at all. I interviewed at a couple places and realized very early on that was not going to happen. And I also realized at that point in my life that I was a terrible employee. Like, it was just not what I was made to do. So I decided, okay, let's create a law firm. And I talked to Demery about it. And she has this amazing ability to trust me to do things. And I just think to myself, sweetie, I'm not a good bat. I'm really not, but she does, and it's fantastic. And that's one of the things I really do enjoy about her and love about her, is that she trusts me to do my thing and to take care of her and the family when it is not seemingly a good bet. So we talk about it, and I start the law firm on the floor of our condo that we had rented. But this is the way law works in the United States. If you go from one state to another, you can't actually practice law in the second state. So I had to take the bar exam over again, which is terrible, terrible exam. Oh, it's awful. I hate it. So I had to take it again. So there was a 6-month period of time where I couldn't actually do anything. And I was trying to make some money where I could. And when we got back here to Utah to make ends meet, I took a job that I had in college. So I was working with mentally handicapped sex offenders. So I took that job that I had in college, but I took the lowest rung of that job I had in college, which was $8.50 an hour. So I would work that. And then the moment I got my law license in Utah, then I opened things up and I would do the law during the day. And I had no clients and no networks. So it was just me sitting around trying to figure stuff out. And then I would, on nights and weekends, I would work this $8.50 an hour job so we could pay rent. So I was doing, 80 hour weeks, somewhere around there. And Yeah, and it was very, I mean, for me personally, it was really super humbling because I was an attorney and I made money as an attorney, and I always thought of myself as at least relatively intelligent guy. And then I'm working this garbage job that 18-year-olds work just to make ends meet. But throughout the entire thing, and that was extraordinarily stressful, and I was very fearful at that period. But again, Dem was great. She just knew that it would work out, and she was okay, and she did her thing, and she, mostly watched after Elliot during that period of time because she'd take him to the preschool at the university. She did a deal and let me do my thing, and again, it was the teamwork, and it worked out. But we didn't see each other a lot during that period of time. But she was great about it.
What I hear too is that she's so constant. And she has such trust in you and faith in you that she allowed you the space and grace and time to really put in what you needed to do. Not really, well, of course she believes in you, but you were like, I don't know if this is going to go anywhere, or, is this a waste of my time? Like, what am I, probably what am I doing sometimes? And then you have the job on the weekends. And so what I hear too about you is just, you are so humble. Like, you are a humble man that does what he needs to do for his family, but also doesn't allow yourself to do things that aren't congruent with what's in your heart. Like, you started to follow your passion. You knew you weren't a good employee for other people. And so you wanted to create something for yourself. And then you have this amazing wife who is pursuing her dreams, as, getting her doctorate in choral performance, right? Choral music.
Yeah. So it was called vocal performance, but it's singing.
Yeah,
right?
And she's amazing. And then you have this little baby that you adopted. He's a toddler at this point, but keep going. How the world did you go from creating a business in the basement of your condo, working an $8.50 an hour job on the weekends, to then having one of the best law firms, divorce law firms in Utah?
At the beginning, it wasn't a divorce law firm. It was just me doing stuff, right? So I took everything that came in the door because I had to provide for Dem and Elliot. So I took everything. I made tons and tons of mistakes as a lawyer. I talk to lawyers now about the mistakes I made and how not to make them. But I made a ton. Everybody who came in that wanted to give me money, I would try to figure out the case, which is not a good way to lawyer because you're just not very good at any given thing. Then at one point, I had a sister from my Mormon mission. I went to Italy and she came in, her husband had cheated on her. So I needed to get her divorced. And I remember she emailed me and said, can you help me with this? And I said, yeah, sure. Absolutely. And I had absolutely no idea about divorce law at all, but I needed money. So I thought, all right, well, I'll figure this out. So I think I stayed up until 3:30 in the morning, reading over everything I could, and then met with her the next day at 9 and said, okay, and she gave me a check for $1,500 and we went through and got everything done. And I remember getting to the end of that process and thinking, wow, I really like that. And I seemed to have gotten her and her kids a pretty good result. So then people just kind of kept coming in for that, right? Out of all the things they came in for, more of it was about that. So I started doing more and more divorce. And a little while into it, I realized that I was really good at it and that I should probably just do that. So it was a real process, but over a couple of years, decided that I was just going to be a divorce attorney, and I've done that ever since. But that's really, even that is a really stripped down version of how difficult that process was. And I tell attorneys all the time now that really you need to figure out what you want to do and just do that one thing and be better at it than everybody else. Because if you do a whole bunch of different things, you're going to be bad at all of those things. Just do the one. Find what you really enjoy or that you're really good at, either one of those, and then just do that one thing.
Yeah, don't try to be a jack of all trades, right? Just specialize.
Yep. Yep. Attorneys do that all the time because they do what I call chase money, right? They're just chasing cash. They're trying to get as many cases as they can in the door for some money. And that is a bad, bad way to go about business in general. Because, I mean, no one would ever think about doing that if they manufactured a product. You wouldn't just manufacture another product because somebody's paid you some money. Like, you just get really good at manufacturing the product that people need, and you do that one thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, that's perfect. Tell me to kind of what's your policy there at the office? How, like, why? There's a reason people kept coming to you, because you were good at what you did. But I also have a feeling that you probably dealt with people with high integrity also. So what's your policy, and kind of how do you manage such a difficult time with individuals?
That's a good question. So I think mostly what we're built on, and look, we all make mistakes as attorneys. You know, we're not perfect by any means, but we try really hard to serve the people that come in the door and that really need our help. So the number one thing that our clients want from us is communication. Even if they don't say that, that's what they want. That's what we found over time. And the number one complaint people have with attorneys is, I call and I can't get a call back. So I remember early on, I thought, well, let's just solve this problem. I'm just going to call people back and talk to them. So we did that. There was a lot of communication going on. And my attorneys now, we have a system where every attorney calls every client every Friday. So if they talked on a Tuesday, they're going to talk again on a Friday. And then our paralegals text them every Wednesday. So there's all of this communication going on, because I found very early on that is what clients really valued, and that's what they want. It's interesting because attorneys think clients want one thing and clients want a totally different thing. So attorneys think that clients want extraordinarily high levels of legal competency and the ability to argue in court. Okay. Kind of, sort of, the clients want that. I mean, they want you to be a good attorney, but clients have a really hard time discerning who a really good attorney is. So this is the example I always use for attorneys. You can go to a hearing and win 9 out of 10 issues for your client. So 90% of things you can win for them, which to an attorney is like, that's amazing, right? I won 90%. That's the way we think about it. But if you were 5 minutes late to that hearing, that is what your client will remember, that you were 5 minutes late, because that is super important to them. And that's what attorneys don't get. They're like, why do you care that I was 5 minutes late? I won 90% of this. But that's not how our clients think about it. So I always try to think of it like, how do our clients think about this? What do they want to see? And then we try to give them that. And we also did the lawyer side, which is, we have to be excellent lawyers, because if we're not excellent lawyers, we should go to lawyer prison because we're terrible at our jobs, right? So I try to marry those two, but really try to give our clients the communication and the sensitivity that they required going through what they're going through at that point in their life.
I love that, because not only do you value your clients and value them as people first and foremost, you also are trying to show up in a very personable way, which is amazing, because, you know, when it comes down to it, good business is always about relationships.
Yep. And to talk to people like they're normal people. So lawyers, for everybody listening, when you go to a lawyer, if that lawyer talks to you like you're a lawyer, like you're supposed to understand what he or she is talking about when he says stupid Latin phrases, just go find another lawyer. Because if you as a lawyer do not have the ability to take very difficult legal concepts and deconstruct them and talk to normal people about them in a way they can understand, then you're not a very effective lawyer, right? And that's what I've tried to do, because it's really super easy for lawyers to talk like lawyers. Like, I can go in a room of 10 lawyers and we can recite things to each other in case law and statutes and do all that kind of stuff that lawyers do and talk in very jargony ways. But what's really difficult is to take all of that, distill it down into ways that normal people can understand that and then communicate with them effectively.
Marco, I'm glad you said that, because I think people often feel like to have a good lawyer, they should be able to find somebody that knows all the terminology. But to actually find somebody that knows the terminology and knows how to be a good lawyer, as well as communicate in a way that is informational and on whichever level your client is on. That's where the gold is. And so I'm so glad you focused on that and said what you said. Now I want to give you a chance to talk about debt and why it's so important to be debt free and what freedom it allows you. So share with us about debt now.
Oh, debt. Yeah. So debt sucks. that this goes into our another part of our story. So it's 2010 is when we came here to Salt Lake, and 2015 is the year that I was voted the top divorce attorney in Utah by my peers. I don't care about accolades, that sort of stuff. I don't put a lot of stock in. That one I really liked because it was my peers voting on it. So I thought that was very, very cool. And I got that award at a big banquet thing, and Demery was there with me, so she was stage with me when I got it. And I thought it was very, very cool. And what was funny about this is the guy who gave me the award is this very nice guy named Jim Hanks. He's a divorce attorney in town. I really respect him. I've really liked him over the years. But he calls and talks to me about and tells me the day before that I'm going to get the award. And he said, so I called, but he started off the conversation by saying, hey, Marco, it's Jim. Hey, Jim, how you doing? Oh, good. So I talked with your wife and I wanted to talk with you a little bit. I'm like, why are we having this conversation, Jim? Because I'm like, is my wife divorced? What's going on, Jim? Did she hire you? And it's like, oh no, it was Jody, right? I'm like, oh no, Jody's my office manager. So he mistook my office manager for my wife. And that freaked me out a little bit. But no, Dem was there with me when I won the award, and I loved it. It was great. And then 2 days after I won the award, I realized that I still had all the same problems from before I won the award. And one of the big problems was that we still had $150,000 in debt from my JD, Dem's master's, and then her doctorate. So, and this period of time, other than the award was tough on me, I'd let myself get unhealthy and fat, and I was fat when I was a kid, and I didn't want to go back to that. So that was very difficult for me, and just emotionally, things were hard. Spiritually, things were difficult. So it was just a very tough time, and I decided this is me kind of talking to myself in my head that things had to change. And I thought, okay, what's the first thing I can change that's causing me the most stress? And I thought, this debt causes me tremendous amounts of stress, right? Because it's taking away money that I could use for Dem and Elliot. It's taking away money I could use for my team. So I decided that had to leave, and went and talked with Demery about that. And I have to admit that conversation was probably more kind of me saying, okay, this is how we're going to handle things, because I need this gone from my plate, than probably a true conversation coming to a confluence between husband and wife. But sometimes we do that as couples too. Dem's done that to me. Like, this has to happen, and I just say, okay, that's fine. If that's really important to you, we're going to do that. So that was 2015, and we made the decision to get rid of our debt. And then we lived like we did in 2010, when we had absolutely nothing. I was working at an $8.50 an hour job, right? We just lived on absolutely nothing, and then paid off that debt as quickly as we possibly could. And it was gone. And life is so much better when you don't have a whole bunch of debt hanging over your head. Because if there's something that makes problems worse in your life, it's debt, right? You want to make sex problems in your marriage worse, have a whole bunch of debt. You want to make parenting problems worse, have a whole bunch of debt. Like, it just makes everything orders of magnitude worse.
I really appreciate you sharing that, Marco, because many of us feel like we should have the nice car, we should have the nice house, we should have all these things, and often before the time that we really should, because in all honesty, can we afford those things without going into the deep, dark debt? And to hear you talk about this inspires me to want to follow in your footsteps and to get rid of student loans, car payments, house payments, and to really truly know what it feels like to be debt free.
Yeah. I mean, we're taught, yeah, we're taught as Americans that it's totally normal to have debt and massive amounts of crushing debt, right? Like that's just, how it is. And that's not how other places in the world think about this stuff. So in Italy, they have very, very minimal personal debt. They just don't carry it. Other places in the world, it's very, very minimal. We think of ourselves as better somehow, than that debt is just a part of our life. And that's awful, right? It just increases stress along every facet of our lives. So just get rid of it. And it frees up so much money and allows us to deal with problems, because if you have money to write a check to solve a problem, you don't have a problem. But if you have a whole bunch of debt and you don't have that money, you got a big problem.
I want you to know, Marco, that your outlook on life and just your perspective on things is so refreshing, because it's so different than the mainstream and logical. And I love it. I love that you are about people. I love that your business has been successful because you've worked hard and you focus on making those relationships safe with those that you are serving in your practice. I really appreciate your outlook on debt when the world says, yes, gain everything you want at the expense of paying it off later. And really being in a huge, huge amount of stress because you want something now instead of waiting. And to know that you and Demery have done this together is just so amazing to me. Because if we can function well together as couples, we can achieve so many amazing things together and really enjoy the heart of what life is about. And it's about each other and our families and making memories and really creating freedom and really being able to focus on what brings us happiness and those people in our life that are there for that, I say that purpose, but we're here for each other.
Oh man, I feel kind of every day that I won the lottery with my wife. I don't have to. The thing that I really, really value is that I am who I am, and she's different than that. So I'm extraordinarily driven. I have to, for example, I have to read constantly. And if I don't read constantly, I get depressed. This is just how my brain works. It never shuts off and it never stops. And that's super annoying sometimes when I just want to sit down and feel something. That I have a really hard time with that because that's just not how my brain is really wired. But I'm extraordinarily driven to accomplish things and to always do the next thing. And my wife is different than that. She's more content about things. And if I realize that if I were married to somebody that was the same as me, that would be horrid. It would be awful, right? But I know that I can go home and the Dem is going to be there, and I never have to worry about anything. She's a great mom. She's a great wife. She's always been there for me, no matter how I act. And it's fantastic just to go home and realize that I don't have to worry about anything ever, that it's going to be fine, and that she's going to, what I want to do unless I'm off the rails. And, she's done that for me before. So she really acts as that, that counterbalance, which is fantastic. And one of the ways, I'll talk about this, one of the ways that she really acted as that counterbalance was in our infertility, if you want to call it a journey or whatever, whatever you want to call it. So we've been infertile forever. And I dealt with it very early on. I just assumed that we would never be able to have kids. That's the way I dealt with it in my mind. So I kind of pushed it off to the side, and I thought, okay, that's fine. If that's the way God wants us to have our life, that's totally fine with me. So, but Dem never accepted that, right? She didn't accept it. She wanted to try. And when I didn't want to try, because I was thinking about other things, but she was fixated on it and she really wanted to. So we tried IVF after a while, and she had to kind of convince me to get into that. I said, fine, all right, we'll try it once. So we did it once, and it took, and then it was ectopic. So we had a baby, but she almost bled out. It was in a fallopian tube, and it almost ruptured and killed her. And that was the most difficult thing I ever had to deal with in my entire life. That was horrible to see my wife sitting there on a table and they're excising a fallopian tube out of her. So there was that, and then I had done what I do, which is to move on from things and put it aside emotionally and just go. And she was not that way. She said, I want to try again. I'm like, nope, I signed on for one of these and then I'm done. And this is the worst experience I ever had in my life. So we don't really fight as a couple. It's never been our relationship. We thought about that. So we were not on the same page. And she thankfully just kept on me until I'm religious, obviously. So I got on my knees, and after a while, I said, okay, how should I handle this? And God told me, look, if it's so important to your wife that she really, really wants this and she's fixated on it, then give it to her. So I said, fine. And we did it. And then we got Teddy. And I remember thinking to myself, man, crud, I'm never going to live this one down. So that happens. And then she comes, after a while, we had one frozen embryo left, and she came back to me and she said, I really want to try again. I'm like, nope, I did this once and then I did it again, and I'm completely done. You're changing the compact here. I don't want to do this. And again, it was, well, I'm gonna stick on this. I'm gonna fixate on it, and then we're gonna keep talking about this. And eventually, it was the same kind of thing where but this one was a little bit different in the sense that I thought about it and I thought, okay, your wife has always done what you've asked of her. She's always trusted you to make the right decision in the things that are in your domain. So why don't you just trust her in this, because this is her domain, really. And I thought, okay, that's fine. I'll trust her decision, which way she wants to go, because she was still kind of half and half on it. Mostly yes, but still kind of half and half. So did that and said, okay, I'll trust whatever decision you make on this. That's fine. And so she went and did her thing and decided, yeah, we're going to try this. We're going to try this again. This is our last embryo. So we're going to do it. And then it took, so, she's pregnant in about between 4 and 5 months, but it was a very interesting process of that give and take that is marriage. Right. And I ask a lot of her emotionally. And then when something like this is super important to her, she asks that of me emotionally, because it was very, very difficult for me to deal with emotionally. And it's that, okay, you have to trust each other. She trusts me in what I do, and I have to trust her in what she does. And it's worked out really well for us.
Marco, thank you for spending the last hour with us. I feel that it has been such a privilege to be at your feet and to really hear your heart and your journey of you and Demarie's story of your life together, of, the difficulty and the person that has built both of you into who you are, as well as the couple that you are now, going from adoption to building your own business after really kind of finding a job and being let down and being without work, and supporting Demarie as she pursued her degrees in college and her doctorate and all of that, to now IVF and having another baby on the way.
Yep. We're going to have a little girl. Her name is Tristan, because I picked that name out when I was 8 years old.
Marco, do you have any fears?
I think I'm scared to have a child when I'm 43. Let's put it that way. Not so much the sex of the child, just the fact that I'll be 43.
43 or not, what an amazing family you guys have. I look at you and Demarie and Elliot and Teddy, and I think, oh my word, what a joy it's going to be to have this little girl. And I'm so excited for you guys. And you know what?
Thanks.
You are going to be like so young. She's going to keep you wrapped around her finger and chasing after her
That little girl is going to keep you young, and you already take such great care of yourself. And so I'm excited to watch and see your family just continue to grow and blossom. It's been really fun. Marco, thank you so much for being on the podcast with us today. Listeners, I hope you can see why I invited Marco here with us today, because I feel it is so important to open the doors and to hear the hearts of good men who are at their wife, their partner, their best friend. They are there at their sides and they work together. And I think I need to highlight that for other listeners as well as other men who might need an example of how that's done. I think we all learn from each other. And part of this community is so that we can support each other and also learn from one another. So thank you for being here with us. No matter what your journey is right now, if you are on the brink of just joy, or if you're in the low of sadness, we love you and we are here with you, and know that wherever you are, you've got this, because life is going to have its ups and it will have its downs. But the constant is that you always have somebody else there with you. And I hope that we can be that for you this Thanksgiving week. Happy Thanksgiving, and may you be blessed. You've got this.
Hey, thanks for this. This was great. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for being here with me today. I hope that you have an amazing day and week. Until next time, sis, be sure to remember that you've got this. Also, go on and check out ygtsis.com. There you can find out what we're up to, podcasts, YouTube videos, and even the shop. Don't worry, it's a great place to be. It's a little bit of unwinding, it's a whole lot of real, and it's exactly what you need. Go check it out, ygtsis.com.